What is your best understanding of what Kyrsten Sinema wants in these negotiations?
Number one, I think she's kept a lot of her demands from going out in the public. But from what I understand, talking to sources, she's got some issues with some of the tax provisions in this bill. She's got some other issues. You know, the problem that Democrats have in all this is that the two holdout senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, they actually don't align in their problems with the bill. Neither one of them likes the full cost of this bill, but there are some climate things in the bill that Sinema really likes that Manchin doesn't. There's tax provisions that Manchin is very comfortable with, but Sinema isn't. So I do think that this is what is making, I think this is going to be extraordinarily complicated. Where she is on the tax hikes of this, I think are going to be the sticking point here. If for some reason they can't get her to yes, it's my understanding it's going to be over the tax provisions.
Do you see any way she just walks away from this?
I'll tell you this, Brahm, and you've covered her. You know her better than I think a lot of people in this town. I can tell you how the White House is now operating and how Democrats are operating. They know she's not bluffing. I can tell you this, they certainly have more confidence Joe Manchin is going to be there at the end than they do her. So I think they are operating with the possibility that she could walk, which is why I think there are some folks in the White House that aren't happy that some Democrats have made her a public target. They don't think that's the best way to cajole her into the coalition.
And yet she has some real skin in the game here. She's very proud of this bipartisan infrastructure bill she helped to negotiate. And so you have Bernie Sanders on as a guest this weekend. Bernie says the Senate has to vote first on the House bill. She says no, House has to vote first on the Senate bill. She really wants that Senate bill, doesn't she? How could she walk away from that?
She does, and I really think that's what she wants. And she's willing to give, I think, some idea of what she'll support, but she's not willing to go all the way and vote for something in the Senate before that bill is voted on in the House. And yet, if you talk to some progressives, and look, there's been some movement here, Brahm. Yesterday, progressives weren't even talking about being reassured with just a blueprint. But I had a conversation with Congresswoman Jayapal, who's the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and she said, look, I can accept these terms, vote for the bipartisan bill, not have to see a Senate vote if I can get the promise in writing, right? So whatever that looks like. The point is this, it looks like some progress has been made. Yes, I do think Sinema doesn't open up more on the negotiations until she sees that bill passed in the House. But I think ultimately that is what she's playing hardball over.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to compare, contrast. Sinema says her hero is John McCain, the original Maverick. How mavericky is she being here, or is this just uniquely Kyrsten Sinema?
When she ran for this Senate seat, she had a theory of the case that a rank-and-file Democrat couldn't win it. So she had to be something different. Now, I think in hindsight, it turns out maybe her theory of the case in 2018 was wrong. Mark Kelly, I would argue, ran as a slightly more traditional Democrat, or at least national Democrat, more in the mainstream lane, not in the progressive lane. And he got the same number as her. So, but I always remind people of this. Politicians are always burdened with how they think about politics on how they won their first race, right? No matter what the new information is, it doesn't matter. However they think they won is how they believe what it takes to stay and what it takes to govern. And at the end of the day, Kyrsten Sinema's theory of the case at 18 was that you had to be a little bit of a uncomfortable Democrat to win over those McCain independents and to win that seat. Whether that is true or not to win in Arizona, I think that's up for debate. But it doesn't matter. That's what she thinks. That's how she's operating. So I do think this is extraordinarily genuine. And I just think it's how she believes you win in Arizona and how she thinks she can succeed. Others would argue she doesn't need to be as worried about it. But, as she would say, hey, I'm the one on the ballot.
The question, I think, here right now is the progressives are just burning up. They held their nose and voted for her in 2018. And now we have 3 groups that say they're raising money to put up a primary opponent. One of them has some real money. Now, granted, it's 3 years away,
Right.
but is that the kind of thing that Kyrsten Sinema might be thinking about?
I think she might be, but, let's bring it back to John McCain. I'm old enough to remember where 2 or 3 years in advance of every one of his reelection fights, there'd be some conservative group, some conservative coalition, some conservative candidate. This is the time they're going to primary McCain, and they're going to beat him. And, how's that J.D. Hayworth Senate seat looking? So, I'm certainly one of those that I would wait to see and watch.
Real quick, is time on their side? How long can this go on?
I think we're talking days, not weeks, but not hours.